just going to jump right into it. My name is Zoe, and I am very much looking forward to the discussion on the rule of law. It is on a quite serious backdrop that we're having this discussion. We have, as you might know, in Hungary and Poland, we have a severe rule of law crisis. The media freedom has been highly restricted. Independent courts are non-existent in, for example, Poland. For the first time ever, the European Court of Justice last year ruled that the independence of courts in Poland was at risk, meaning that for the first time ever, the Court of Justice actually said the rule of law is non-existent in one of the EU member states, which has never happened before. And as you know, to join the European Union in the first place, of course, you need these values, such as the rule of law, democracy, independent institutions. You need to have that. So what do we do when countries don't have it anymore? And to answer that very difficult question, I am really looking forward to hear your thoughts. So maybe if we just start with you, Kim, what do you see? First of all, why does it matter to people in Denmark? What happens in Hungary and Poland? Maybe to start off there.
Yes, does it work?
Yeah, I think you have to turn it on here.
Yes. Oh, yes, it works. Good. First, I would like to say that I think the crisis would be even greater if they weren't a part of EU, because then we wouldn't have the ability to influence them. And that's a very important step of EU, that this is a group of countries that has decided to go together to influence each other. That's a very important step when you go into the EU, and sometimes you just get in a wrong direction, and that happens to democracies also. And I think EU is a very excellent example on how you can help each other on the right path again. And we should acknowledge that and just say this is what happens. This is what happens in democracies, because it is a democracy. And we should use the tools of democracy to handle it, not the tools out of democracy to handle it. And that's a very important conclusion on what happens in Poland and what happens in Hungary. That's not the same as saying that nothing can be done, because a lot of things can be done about it. I think that rule of law is one of the most important values. I think that rule of law is not a negotiation. That has been a kind of momentum where the countries use rule of law as a kind of negotiation, and we should go away from that. I think we should actually talk about it as saying that this is a value that cannot be negotiated. And then there's a paradox too. There's a paradox that countries like Poland and Hungary, which is quite new as democracies, they gain freedom and then they throw it away. Why do they do that? We should discuss this in an open area, and we should discuss it with them on the long run. Because if we look at the accession of new countries in EU, we should have a fixed way of doing it. We should be more firm about the values. They should know from the start off, if they sign the treaty, this is what you are doing. This is not negotiable. So if we take Western Balkan countries in, they should be very sure that this is not negotiable. Then we should also be hard on sanctions. If you look at Poland, we can see that they only accept the justice, the judge coming from the EU Court of Justice, because the economical sanctions are so tough. They're not accepting it because they think it's right. They are accepting it because they would lose a lot of money. And that we should discuss too, because if that's the case, I think we have a bigger problem. And we should address it as a big problem, and we should actually make very hard sanctions so you don't go on this path. Concrete, I suggest that we strengthen the EU Court of Justice. If we look at the Poland case, it was in 2017 the Callesen report said we have a problem in Poland. And it took 5 years where Poland did a lot of things to get out of the conclusion from the Callesen report. And I think 5 years is too long. I think we should strengthen the EU Court of Justice. We should make a quick procedure. We should make quick and clear rulings. And we should make an easy access to advice. So countries trying to do it can get an advice from the EU Court of Justice what they think we should do this or that. And I think this would actually help the process in the future if countries like Poland and Hungary is doing something out of order, let's say, like that. And the rule of law, we have to preserve the rule of law always.
Thank you. And Sophie, do you agree that the role of the Court of Justice could be strengthened? Is that a viable tool to solving the rule of law crisis? Because at least I can think of at least one downside of that, which is already the criticism of the European Court of Justice, the Court of Justice of the EU, is that it has this dynamic way of interpreting law, so it becomes political, some say. So will that, is that a viable tool in your opinion, or are there other tools in the toolbox of the EU to solve the rule of law crisis?
I think it could be a solution, yes, but I think the problem right now is that I actually think that European Court of Justice is doing its job. When you look at the situation when it comes to Poland's recovery and resilience plan, which every country got the opportunity to get some funds after the corona crisis, and then they had to make this plan of recovery and resilience. And in that plan, they also had to make sure to basically explain how they upheld the rule of law. And Poland's plan was, to say the least, problematic. And there is a ruling by the European Court of Justice about Poland and the judiciary. And the Commission decided to approve the plan. And the Danish government decided to go with the Commission, even though the Commission was split. So I think this is a big discussion, basically, about. I think we should strengthen the European Court of Justice by having the other institution, that is the Commission, that are the governments, respecting the Court of Justice, and they should never have approved that plan. So that would be my answer. But if I think I would allow myself just to mention what I think are the two main pathways to solving the problem of the rule of law situation in Europe, which of course is generally mostly about Poland and Hungary. And I think we have to say, first of all, we have underestimated the need to build a strong civil society. I agree with Kim that being members of the European Union is so important, and it has made a difference for those countries. It has made a difference when it comes to rule of law, democracy, etc. But we kind of thought that once they reach the Copenhagen criteria, they're part of the family, everything will be good, everything will be fine. But what is really important is to build the strong links with the people in the countries, that they feel that they are part of the family, they're European, they wish to live in a civil society, have a civic space, be part of a country where rule of law is upheld. And I think we have underestimated that task. We have thought that we just have to deal with governments. That was wrong. The second thing is we also need to deal with governments. And governments, as Kim says, they understand things that are about money. Also other things, hopefully, but at least they respect the money decisions. And therefore, it is essential that we don't give any money to countries that do not respect rule of law. Therefore, as I mentioned, Poland's money should not have been, the plan should not have been approved by the Commission. We have the Danish commissioner, which is of course also from my party, Margrethe Vestager. She did not think that the plan was good enough because she took her responsibility as guardian of the treaty seriously. Unfortunately, the commission did not do that, I think, well enough. They didn't do their job well enough. And the governments in Europe, in my opinion, also didn't take this seriously enough because Poland has taken refugees from Russia, or from Ukraine, sorry. And to be honest, I think that influenced the decision that they did not want to be too tough on Poland now. And I think that was a really huge mistake because it undermines the respect of the rule of law. So, yeah. So 2 concrete steps. One is to build the links with the civil society, and the other one is to really respect the rule of law and the steps that you need to take, and therefore not to give any money to the countries, and not just to give, first of all, not give them any money, but also help money back when they don't respect it.
Thank you for those remarks, Anthony, and I think you're touching on some crucial points there. And Federico, I would like to hear you also comment on those. So, have we underestimated the role of citizens and civil society organizations? Because we know, for example, in Poland, there is a big initiative that is called the civil, I forgot the name, but basically some civil rights activists that are also lawyers that are extremely well, powerful, but also they really work for those independent courts. And they're being suppressed, and so many civil society organizations, especially working on the rule of law, are being undermined in Poland and Hungary. How do we then now, because we clearly did not strengthen our ties with them enough, how do we do that from now on? Have we underestimated their role? And also this point you have on refugees, has the rule of law crisis been forgotten because of the Ukrainian war, and since Poland has played an enormous role in receiving refugees? So some big questions there for you, Federico, and then the rest of you can also comment.
Thank you very much. Does it work? And thank you, Anna. I have the feeling that you also somehow anticipated what I was about to say. I don't think it works, by the way. Right? It does work. No? How about now? No. Doesn't sound right. No, but is there a mic somewhere? Thanks. Better? Yeah, much better. Okay, thank you very much, Zoe. I was saying that I have the feeling that Anne anticipated what I was about to say, and I very much appreciate when I hear politicians supporting civil society, because civil society plays a crucial role in the protection of the rule of law and fundamental rights. As Anne rightfully said, civil society, organized civil society, has to be part in this process of protection and upholding of the rule of law, because they provide expertise, they provide knowledge, they represent a direct link between simple citizens, Europeans in our case, and the government and decision makers. And they also provide transparency, good governance, as I said, expertise, accountability. Those are all crucial words that have a lot to do with the respect for the rule of law. And so we've mentioned the case of Hungary and Poland. The European movement is active in over 30 countries. It's a membership-based organization, and that also includes not only NGOs and civil society organizations, but also political parties like ALDE, academia, think tank, business, trade unions, so very broad membership. And what we've seen in many countries is that organized civil society is generally in danger, has not been able to properly work, has been massively attacked by governments. And let's be very clear, we've rightfully said a lot about Hungary and Poland, but there's a widespread general rule of law crisis that involves many other countries, starting from mine, Italy, of course, or perhaps there's a lot to say about Romania, about Bulgaria, and someone can also maybe be surprised about the things that have been happening in Greece, in which essentially media freedom doesn't exist. Someone can be surprised, I'm just giving some random examples to make a point, that according to several organizations, France has been defined as a failing democracy, a failing state, when it's about upholding democratic values. Just some examples to give you an idea, because of course Hungary and Poland are the main culprits of these violations and crackdown on civil society. You know, our own organizations there, they've been essentially dismantled. They've lost their power, they've lost their ability, they've lost funding immediately, and this has been going on for many years. We mentioned 2017 started way before. So of course, civil society must be protected, must be involved, because in doing so, how can I say, by consequence, you also involve citizens, and you protect them. Because as we said, a functioning democracy means that the economy works, the fundamental rights are upheld. So of course, better rule of law means better life, to make it romantic. And I also very much appreciated what Kim said about the fact that it's not negotiable, because we cannot sit on the table and say, hey, how about fundamental rights, how about minorities, do we really care about them? We cannot even have this conversation, as you said. I very much agree with that, and I'm very happy that I've heard that. More concretely, since some ideas have been floating and they are very, very good, we've talked about, of course, withdrawing EU funds from these countries so that they don't use them, because as you said, they are crucial. If you think about Hungary, I think it's about 8 billion euros that are part of the recovery plan, and for a country like Hungary, it's a huge portion of their GDP. So of course we very much welcome the fact that the Commission very late triggered the rule of law conditionality. We all agree with that, but it's really a good step, and it's the first time. But then there's also something else. There's what they're called membership rights. There's also something else which is called the rule of law framework, which is enshrined in Article 7 of the Treaty of the European Union. What does that mean? It's a very lengthy procedure. Kim excellently said that procedures should be improved in terms, they must be quicker, they must be faster, absolutely. But this procedure is very important, and it's also been triggered, and it takes a lot of time. And what does this imply? It's both preventive and sanctioning mechanism, which means that once some serious breaches of the rule of law are actually identified and not improved, some membership rights can be removed from these countries. And this is super important, and what I mean by that, and then I will conclude, it means that, for example, these member states cannot vote in the Council. And you know, this is a huge thing, especially in a situation in which the Council, for very important decisions that have to do with the rule of law and democracy, vote by unanimity. And speaking of the proper, this is for me the definition of a catch-22 of what the European Union is, this rule of law mechanism cannot be fully implemented. And guess what? Because there's unanimity in the Council. And when you, the same country that is risking to lose these membership rights can vote on them. So, of course, we can have very long conversations about unanimity, and there are many politicians that really don't want to have this conversation. I don't think it's your case, it's more like other bureaucrats. But I just wanted to make a point that the toolbox that the European Union has been creating, shaping, and hopefully improving has a lot to offer, but of course needs to be improved, absolutely.
Thank you for those remarks, and you really mentioned a lot of those tools as well that we have in the toolbox, the rule of law, conditionality, this idea of withholding funds if you're not upholding those values. And as you say, it's not as straightforward as we would wish sometimes, and as fast. But then I would like to go back to our Danish politicians, and maybe starting with you and Sophie. So we hear of all these tools, these challenges. We're about to have an election in Denmark. What role specifically do you think or hope that the new Danish government and parliament can play in improving this situation? Because as we see, we need unanimity for some decisions, but we can also push through civil society, and there are a lot of tools, but it requires political will, and political will is exactly what you politicians are for, because with rules, well, we can do a lot of things, but if politicians don't want to use them, then it's hard. So what do you hope to see from a new government?
Well, I think it is really important that a new government, and I would say a new parliament, that we're together in being brave enough to still speak up about the rule of law situation, not only in Poland and Hungary, but Poland is a good example because, as I mentioned before, I think that after the crisis in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, that has meant that some of the criticism has been silenced about Poland, and I think it is really crucial that we don't mix things here, because I really appreciate, I'm about to go into a new debate afterwards about migration, I appreciate what Poland has done for refugees from Ukraine, but that really has nothing to do with them making political decisions about the judiciary, that there is no connection at all, except that I think some Danish politicians now seem to have the idea, and that includes the government that we have now, the Social Democrats, that maybe if we try to be friends with Poland now rather than pushing them away, they will be on our side rather than with Hungary. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be friends with Poland, but of course we have to be critical friends, because you have to be honest with your friends, and you cannot just silence criticism about your friends. So I think what is important is that all member states don't just leave it to the Commission and to the Court of Justice to criticize countries such as Poland and all other countries where there are problems regarding respect for rule of law. So I think I'm not saying that it will be a problem, because I know that Venstre, the Liberals, are concerned as well. I know the Conservatives are. I know that the Social Democrats are as well. But my fear would be that once you're in the government and once you have to sit at the table with Poland and you appreciate what they have done when it comes to Ukraine, suddenly you can't really get the words out of your mouth about your concerns when it comes to rule of law. And that is, I think that's the most important thing, that we still talk about it, that we are open about it, and that we don't just leave it to someone in Brussels to handle.
Kim, are you going to be brave enough if you continue also to be involved in I know you're both in the European Committee, so you deal with these issues as well. Are you going to be brave enough?
Yes, I hope so. If I'm elected, you never know what happens. But I think that Denmark should, on this point, we should be very firm in our leadership, because leadership is what really moves people. And we need to have leadership on this issue, rule of law. And it's not about the Commission, it's not about the Council, it's not about the European Parliament, it's about people in the countries. And we need to put up a discussion in Poland and in Hungary, other countries, and we need to do it. We need to do it as a country, because we can say that we are one of the countries in Europe that has respected the rule of law. And we need to take part in that discussion on another level than before. So I think that we need to show leadership in this area and really go for it and help the new countries, the Eastern European countries too, with understanding what is rule of law. That is not negotiable. That is something that should come from within. That's something you should understand, not because you get money for it, but because you think it's right. And this is what leadership is about.
Right, so we can, in Denmark, we can play or be used as an example, and we should use that leadership role in the rest of Europe.
Yes.
Do you think, maybe from an Italian perspective, could you give us maybe also some context, because you also mentioned your own country in your round of criticisms. So can Italy play a role a leading role in this rule of law crisis? Because as Kim mentioned, the European Union, the institutions, the councils, it's not just empty bureaucratic names. It's people, it's governments, it's national politicians who require political will to take decisions. How do you see your local or national situation?
Yes, I'm very much aware of the upcoming Danish elections, and good luck, of course. And as you may have heard, we are also having elections very soon. The 18th snap election for a very bizarre crisis that occurred in the middle of the summer. But, Italian politics is a lot of fun, clearly. And to answer to your question, I genuinely believe that democracy is in danger in my country. I don't know how much you've been following. I try to be brief and unbiased as possible. It's not going to be easy. We have these two big coalitions, far right, very close to fascist coalition that has a very strongly reactionary agenda that clearly involves and very much implies a huge crackdown on the basic human rights, minorities, equality, and on the other hand, there's a sort of a center left-wing coalition that is very much more pro-European and progressive, of course. And according to the polls, this extreme right coalition is, according to the polls, of course, there's still a month, and many things happen in a month when it's about politics. But according to the polls, this coalition will certainly win, and according to the electoral reform that we have, they will massively win. They will have easily 2/3 of the seats, which is also enough, by the way, to change the constitution in my country, which is part of their agenda, and do it in a very anti-democratic, anti-political way. So you asked me if we can lead by example. I'm really struggling to give an answer. I don't know how I can choose my words in this case. I can say that Italy has always been strongly pro-European. There's always been a very vibrant and strong civil society, trade unions, and active citizenship. Things have changed lately, of course. Citizens have been feeling very much alienated, distant, left aside, in a moment in which, also inequalities and the economic recession that essentially has never stopped in my country since 2011 have really broadened these huge inequalities and disparities with very negative effects on society, of course. So apologies for this sober comment. I didn't want to ruin the mood, but I'm just trying to say that it's a very worrying situation. I've mentioned this far-right coalition. There are some pro-European elements. It may come as a joke for you, but let's say the most moderate person in there is Berlusconi, surprisingly enough. Things have changed so much and so weirdly in my country that all of a sudden Berlusconi can be seen as an example. Can you imagine, after all the things that he's done to my country? We shall see, of course. Rule of law is really part of the agenda of the electoral program, both positively and negatively, of course, because it's not only about democracy and fundamental rights, but also minorities. There's a huge debate about the LGBTIQ community in Italy that has been very, very much targeted by not only by political parties, but also in general in the most disgraceful form of discrimination. So we shall see. It's in less than a month, and don't know what else to say. We shall see.
Yeah, thank you for that analysis. I think, did you have a remark before? Or did you? I just saw you raise your hand.
Yes, that was actually after Kim, because I just wanted to agree that it does matter what membership countries do. I mean, what the Danish government has done, also to complement that at least, and what we have also, because we have pushed them to do it in the parliament regarding Poland. So we cannot just sit and wait for the Commission or the Court of Justice to do something. So it also means something when Denmark goes out and criticizes the Polish government, for example, or whatever government, but takes a clear stance. And I think lately there has been a tendency to say that, well, this is the obligation of the Commission, so we of course we are against, etc., but they will need to fix it. And that is a shift away from the very clear stance that Denmark took, and I think we have an obligation to speak up, not because we're a perfect country, but because we are one of the countries where we have our things sort of in order when it comes to rule of law. So countries like Denmark, like for example Sweden, other countries, Scandinavian countries, need to speak up about it, because that also sets the agenda in Brussels, and it means that Poland has to react.
Absolutely. But I think that this leadership role that I'm kind of hearing from both of you would also not require that the Danish government, or also in general in the European Union, could play a larger role. Because we've seen with Brexit that suddenly there's a vacuum of kind of leadership, and we see France and Germany. Germany has a new government. There's all these political changes within the European Union, and leadership-wise, it's been this kind of run between Germany and France, and then we had kind of the UK as number 3, and maybe the Netherlands and maybe Denmark if we have to kind of range it down can Denmark play then a larger role on, and will it with the new government? Because I guess again it's political will, but do we have the nerve to do that? Do you want to start?
Yes, I do. I think that the leadership, we can perform leadership on many areas, but now we're discussing the rule of law. That's obvious. This is one of the areas which we can do a big effort, and we can actually prove by example that it is possible to have a rule of law that is functioning, and that people understand that they live with, and that they understand that they won't let go because they are paid for it. So that's one of the areas we can lead by example. But we could take the green agenda. That's also a step where we can do a big difference. We're not discussing the green agenda today, but there's also leadership in many other areas, and I think that other countries can do the same. When we are talking about expansion, which we are also discussing here, and then the French Parliament has proposed to have another level of cooperation between countries on a political level. I think it's a good idea to discuss that, and the French has actually taken leadership on this part, and I think we should discuss how to do that, because some of the Western Balkan countries, they are not prepared to do everything in one step, for instance, but they could cooperate in a political sense, and I think Denmark could take perhaps the rule of law and go to Western Balkan and say, we can show you how to do this, and we will take hands-on, perhaps not every country, but we can take hands-on one or two countries and help them to understand how to do the rule of law. So there is a political culture in the country afterwards. And I think we should discuss how to do that in the future. I would like to take part in that after the elections. I think Denmark should make a new step where we are more active in our foreign policy, and this should be one of the steps that we should take. I also think that other countries could do the same, and I think that EU is the right place to do it.
Okay, well, interesting, and I'm glad you mentioned that French proposal, because it really has divided opinions. Some think that it's bad to create a two-step Europe, so you have kind of A and B citizens, or A and B countries, where some have more rights than others, but some also see it as a step into the integration process that is maybe easier, since once you apply for membership to the EU, maybe there's 10 or 15 years until you're a fully fledged member. So maybe it's also a pragmatic solution, depending on opinions. Maybe can we hear both of your remarks on that French proposition, or any versions of it that you like or are interested in? Federico, do you want to start?
Very quickly, I was in Strasbourg when Macron talked about this proposal, and I think it's still extremely vague. There hasn't been very much follow-up ever since. But all this to say that, firstly, let's see what they mean by that, what they intend to do. But I think in principle I would not very much support such a move, because the European Union is one. We should see the European Union as one. Of course, it's an organization, it's a collection of gathering of member states, several cultures, several, let's say, also political systems, of course. But I don't understand why we should essentially rank member states somehow, especially in the moment in which this indirectly has always happened and never really been seen so well. Because of course some member states, depending on the occasion, have always perhaps led more than others, because maybe they've been more powerful on a political or economic level, but that's not what the European Union stands for or is. So, of course, as both Anne and Kim said, when let's say, said very brutally, a country is doing better in a field or in something, of course it should lead by example. Denmark is a good example when it's about the rule of law, but also the environment, climate and energy governance. Of course, I mean, just to get back to Italy, to approve what's it called, wind energy plan to approve it. In Italy it takes 5 to 7 years. And we have the 2030 environmental goals. I don't even know where we're going, honestly. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it's really my thing, because then, again, why do we always need to split member states, make comparisons? I don't support that. I don't see the added value, and we don't see that.
Well, I think I'm more on your side, because I understand where Macron and where you're coming from, but I think it's a tricky question, because what do we want to, what's the goal when you do this? And of course it is to bring the countries closer to the real club of real European countries, but I think in doing that you actually, you do the opposite. You sort of say that yes, there is an A and B team here, and I think some of the problems that we have seen in especially Eastern European countries are because they don't, even though they're part of the club, they don't really feel part of the club. They know, and you can say that even within Germany, for example, for many years, and still some of it, Eastern and Western Germany, there is this sense of not really being good enough, not really performing well enough in Eastern Germany, not really being good enough as well as they are in Western Germany. And I think that is the split that we still see. We still have the iron carpet somehow in Europe. And I just don't want to strengthen that iron carpet again. So anyways, I don't think this is the way to go. I understand the proposal, but I don't think the solution lies here. No.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, then you of course can comment as well, and you will actually get the concluding remark. Fair or not, I get the
alright. I'm advocating for that EU has an open front door, a wide open front door, because there's another agenda that is more important than much other stuff in Europe, and that's the peace agenda. It's moved up on this. Why do we have EU? We create peace with the EU, and we can see that. And if you look at the Western Balkan countries, we can see a Dayton agreement that's not functioning. And if we don't do anything, perhaps everything will explode within a couple of years. And I think that the French proposal to open the front door a little more will help this peace process. And that is what I'm thinking about. First step. Of course, it should not be an easy way to EU. We still have our values. But we are talking about a cooperation on a political level that will bring, for instance, Serbia closer to Europe and further away from Russia and China, which is very important in this area of Europe. So I think that we should discuss the French proposals. It is very vague. It's not concrete, and I think that we should be prepared to discuss it and say, okay, perhaps some places in Europe we need to open up both the front door and the back door, because it should also be like that if you don't perform like Hungary and Poland doesn't do, there should be a consequence. So we need to open up the front door and the back door and be a really community with good goals and leadership in the future.
Thank you. Let's see then which doors will be open. And with those words, I wish you both, the two of you, a great election.
Thanks.
And well, my hope from a citizen's perspective is of course that you will help clarify to Danes why this rule of law issue also matters to them, because I think that's also an important agenda for European interested politicians like you and for the rest of us. And also best of luck for the elections, turbulent elections in your country, and hoping that civil society also can play a great role in information, the rule of law.